Growing up, I was a Nintendo kid, even though I didn't have an N64, RetroRemastered.com. So I never got to experience the PlayStation until I started collecting. And even now, I've kind of neglected it. So what better way to kickstart my PS1 journey than with building the ultimate PlayStation 1?
Yup, that's me. I bet you're wondering how I ended up here.
All the way back in October of 2022, I went to the Portland Retro Gaming Expo and picked up this guy as an impulse purchase. I'd always thought about modding a PS1, but I'd never pulled the trigger until I saw this on the convention floor. And I kept thinking about it until July 18th, 2023. It took a very long time, but I eventually got to installing it. This was something I knew from the start that I wouldn't be able to make a full tutorial on. Even with the hundreds of Game Boy mods I've done, I've only done a couple other projects that could match this level of difficulty. For this mod, you have to solder this board to the backside of a PS1 motherboard. Easy enough, right? Well, this part actually isn't too bad if you pre-tin all the spots on the PS1 you'll need to solder to, and if you don't burn one of the friggin' pads. But with the help of my multimeter and some patience, I was able to successfully install a jumper wire and I was ready for part 2, the hardest part. This mod requires that you lift a few pins on the CPU, the most important part on the entire motherboard. And there are over 100 tiny little pins soldered very close to each other. Hopefully you don't accidentally lift any of the wrong pins or rip any of the pads. Good luck! After a bit of work under the microscope, it didn't look pretty. But I was 99% sure I did it. 99% sure. From there, finishing the mod is baby easy. Just a few screws and plugging in some ribbon cables and you're good. Once I got it all together, I plugged it in and oh, I hear the sounds.
But why is it stuck on the boot screen?
What's going on? Obviously, I did something wrong. Was it my QSB? Did I lift the wrong pins? Is my SD card reader bad? I watched a ton of YouTube videos, read a bunch of forums, and retried it a million times. Sometimes I could actually get it to boot, but it was like 1 in 20 tries. I assumed it was the SD card reader because I saw this video saying a lot of them are actually faulty. So I replaced the SD card reader twice. It still just randomly worked when it wanted to. Then I tested every solder point on my QSB for continuity with the PS1 and confirmed that was all good. So it just left me with the CPU. And sure enough, I had accidentally lifted a couple pins that I shouldn't have. So I reflowed some solder, accidentally bridged a couple connections, tore some pads, snapped some of the pins off the CPU. I had broken it beyond repair. I was heartbroken. I felt incompetent. And just when I thought all hope was lost, I remembered this kit comes with a second QSB for the 1000 models. And if there's one thing you should know about me, it's that I hate giving up. I went straight to my friend's game store, stole one of his PS1s when he wasn't there, and I got to work. With everything I learned from the videos I watched and the mistakes I made, I was ready to kick this mod's butt. Only I didn't say but. I tore it apart and soldered the QSB down with ease, but I changed up my strategy for the CPU. My problem before was my tweezers were too thick, so I would accidentally move the pins around the one I was trying to lift. I'd learned in one of the videos that dental tools are actually really helpful for things like this. So I spent $8 whole on this set and gave it another go. But this time I wanted to do a dry run without my soldering iron, just to make sure I could fit one of these picks between the pins. And it did, but I also discovered something else that should make my life a lot easier. Now, I do not recommend anyone try this. I fully believe I got extremely lucky, but when I did my dry run, I accidentally popped the pin off the board. All I did was just get the pick underneath the pin, and when I tried to pull it out, the pin lifted up. No torn pad, no nothing. Everything was fine. And just then, I had an epiphany. None of the pins on the CPU looked like they were soldered down too well. And so I decided to risk it all and lift all the pins I needed lifted with that dental pick without my soldering iron. And that was one of the dumbest decisions I have ever made. But it worked, baby. I ran circles around my house when it finally worked. And it works every time. I successfully installed the XStation. But please don't do what I did unless you fully understand that you could easily ruin your entire PlayStation. I don't recommend just lifting pins like that. But how does the XStation work? Well, it's a disk drive alternative. So it replaces this whole thing and just reads your legally obtained and backed up games off of an SD card. It's actually super easy to back up your PS1 and PS2 games. I'll have a tutorial linked below. So once you boot up your console, it'll go to this menu and you can just pick your games and go. Super simple. Definitely a solid alternative if your PS1 has a bad disk drive. But mine are all good and I don't really need them anymore. So I'll have them up for sale in the garage sale section of my website if you want them. Also linked below.
And I'll also list my first attempt in case someone wants to use it for parts.
The biggest downside to me, since I'd used the 1000 model PS1, is that the cool aftermarket shells are not compatible with my console. It's not too bad, because I always enjoy when a modded console blends in with the originals, but if given the choice, I probably would take the cool looking shell. But thankfully, the rest of the mods for my Ultimate PS1 are plug and play. Like in my Ultimate PS2 video, I'm using this wireless controller adapter so I can play my PS1 with the DualSense. I really don't like using wired controllers, and I didn't like the DualShock until the PS4. Plus, I don't normally notice input lag unless it's an intense game, so this setup is perfect for me. But I definitely understand that that's too much delay for some of you. And also like my Ultimate PS2, I decided not to install an HDMI mod in this one. And no, it's not because I struggled with the XStation, but that's fair. It's because I have the RetroTink 5X Pro. I love my RetroTink, and that's how I've gotten all of this footage to look so beautiful. I'm working on a video explaining why I choose to use an upscaler over HDMI mods. I'll go more in depth in that video, so get subscribed to see that when it comes out, hopefully in the next couple weeks, if I post this when I think I'm posting this. But RetroTink's upscalers make consoles look as beautiful or even better than some HDMI mods, and it's all without the extra work. Plus, if you're modding multiple consoles like me, the 5X Pro will end up being about the same price as 3 HDMI mods, and I definitely use it with more than just 3 consoles. The last thing I want to mention is the Raspberry Pi Pico memory card mod. I didn't end up doing it. I might do it in the future, but don't hold your breath. Instead, I bought one of these guys off AliExpress. Work smarter, not harder. I don't know the differences between this, the Pico mod, or the MemCard Pro, but this little guy does everything I care about for around $15. And now I can enjoy this beautiful Castlevania in crystal clear 1440p with my DualSense without having to risk damaging any discs. But if you like this video, a like and subscribe would be greatly appreciated. It was actually fun to show off that even people like me can struggle with mods sometimes. But anyways, like, subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one. Later, guys. I like to trade this in.
I think you're missing a piece.
It's okay. Oh no.